Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session, Mastering the FDA's Quality Maturity Program. We're just going to take a few minutes for everyone to log in. So we'll start in just a few moments. So please feel free to write where you're from. I'm based in New York City. Some of you guys may have already seen me this morning. So please feel free to write in the chat where you're located so we can see where everyone is before we start today. Sweden. All right. Good evening. Amnon, you can just leave it on that first slide right now before we start.
Okay, will do.
Awesome.
Sure.
Yeah, we're just waiting for everyone to join. We just try to give an extra minute before, since I know everyone has to kind of log in. Sometimes it might be the first time using Goldcast, but really great platform. Hi, Astrid from Germany. South Africa. I'd much rather be there right now. It's very cold. It got snow today in New York City. Awesome. All right. So we will start today. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ashley. I am here with Qualio, and Amnon is going to be our speaker today. He will be off screen, and I'm going to go off screen after I do this introduction, just due to some Wi-Fi connectivity issues. So just please let us know if there's any issues or you can't hear us anymore. So we will start. So like I said, thank you so much for joining today's session, Mastering the FDA's Quality Management Maturity Program. This webinar is part of a 3-day Beyond Compliance event. So we're really glad that you're joining this third session of today. And Amnon is a subject matter expert and your speaker for this presentation today. This session will be recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email in the next couple of days with the resources and this recording. And if you do not, please feel free to reach out to Qualio by the end of the week. And just a huge thank you to our co-sponsor for this 3-day event with Qualistry. Qualistry helps pharma professionals stay up to date by connecting them with top experts and service providers worldwide. And in conjunction with Qualio and Qualistry, this event would just not be possible. So thank you so much for Yan and the Qualistry team. So on the next slide, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're glad that you are here. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the options on how to engage with myself and Amnon. As you guys are already posting in here, please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourselves and to the other audience members in this chat. We absolutely encourage you to ask as many questions along the way. We will stop and answer them throughout the presentation. And at the end, if we have time, we'll answer as many questions as we can. And again, this session will be recorded. So today's hosts on this next slide is your presenter is Boston-based Amnon Eylath. Amnon is a seasoned quality leader experienced in a complete life cycle of biological and small molecule drug development, from discovery through non-clinical and tox studies, clinical trials, process and method development, GMP manufacturing, validation, regulatory submissions, and commercial product approvals. He's worked at various capacities in international companies such as Amgen, Eli Lilly, and Sanofi Genzyme, as well as at cell therapies like Cellcore Therapies, Histogenics, and Minovia Therapeutics, as well as founding and leading his own GXP consultancy, Broad Spectrum, and serving as Alcus Pharmaceutical's head of quality. Amnon is an active volunteer with the PDA, a chair for the drafting of Technical Report T57, co-author of the TR65, and a former president of the New England chapter of the PDA. So, today's agenda, we are going to go over the history and context of the program, the mature PQS, and signals and ingredients. Now, lastly, who is Qualio? So before I hand it over to Amnon, we want to remind you that Qualio is an all-in-one EQMS system enabling therapeutic teams to bring life-saving products to market. So with that being said, I will pass over the presentation to Amnon. And as a reminder, he will be not on video due to some Wi-Fi issues, but please feel free to write any questions in the chat and we will get to them. So go right ahead, Amnon, and you can start the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm just verifying that you can hear me okay?
I can hear you and you sound very clear, so thank you.
Great, great, very good. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I'm glad you're here. And we, have also an interactive session with opportunity for people to ask questions about the pharmaceutical quality system and in a sense, the quality maturity model that the FDA has been promoting over recent years. So, if we look back, one of the drivers for the FDA to bring out something in addition to the regs, in addition to the various guidance and ICH and such, is a methodology of helping companies assess their quality maturity, because many companies have quality systems, but were not necessarily working properly, or some aspects were, others weren't. I think there's often areas related to, again, oversight of facilities, equipment validation, dealing with out of spec and such. So these actually cause drug shortages, as some of the companies that FDA was inspecting were determined to really not have capable quality systems or at the level of maturity required. And the focus was mainly on parenteral manufacturing. We can take these lessons learned across technologies, but where the real challenges and issues were with parenterals, and as we know, there are many products that are generic and manufactured all around the world. And this study was done including surveying international companies. So we look at most of the drug shortages were really caused by suboptimal product or manufacturing quality, which led to either delays or even to some of these companies just shutting down or giving up these product lines, since they did not want to, invest great costs in bringing up their quality systems and their operational quality to acceptable levels. I think from the FDA's perspective, the companies were focusing on compliance, which we know the compliance with the FDA, with regulations. There are also, EMA regulations and MHRA and guidance, etc. But it's really what needs to be in place, what practices and procedures should be in place to ensure what we call the CISPQ of the product. It's safety, identity, stability, potency, and quality. And but in a sense, what people forget is the GMPs are considered baseline. People can do the GMPs, but they can also apply them at different levels of rigor and can add additional practices that enhance reliability. Um, Again, because we're dealing with generics, cost containment was a major factor. And some of these companies were really trying to do things with as little investment as possible. And it was felt that, the quality system area, oversight, especially areas related to CAPA, improvements, remediation, were shortchanged. So logistical challenges when a company has to reject a lot, cannot approve a lot, has to recall a lot of material, or at the same time, they may be inspected and not allowed to release product because it's substandard in quality, and obviously especially quality related to things like safety, stability, that have major impact on patient safety and efficacy of the drug. These manufacturers did not have many incentives to improve because improvements would have cost them. So they're rewarded for being compliant, but at the same time, one can be, and this is actually something I used to, excuse me, it's just very dry here in Boston now. We have snow all day. Used to be that one company can make a product, 100% compliant product that is failed. You can make a failed product, but it'll be 100% compliant. You'll identify how it failed, when it failed, whether it's in your specifications or in gross failures in compliance, and you'll identify that and reject the product and use it for something else or pour it down the drain. You're still being compliant. So just compliance itself is no guarantee of product quality. We know that if you're not compliant at all, it's usually a very high guarantee of low product quality, but just meeting the GMPs itself does not guarantee product quality. So FDA came up with proposals. They thought about this a lot and wanted to develop an industry-wide understanding of the impact of drug shortages and how to prevent them. So, since whether it's companies making their own product or people making product at contract manufacturers, they really wanted to see a more consistent application of these best practices beyond just the minimal GMPs. And they came up with the concept of a quality management maturity rating system. Rating systems were always problematic to FDA because if anyone's seen observations from FDA, they don't even categorize them as low, medium, high risk. They just give observations and they talk about their impact. Originally, they used to do more of that, but then they found that the companies were more focused on the rating, not on how do I fix things in my plant. But they wanted something that would not be tied in to actual, how would I describe it, neither punitive nor prescriptive. And by creating this sort of external concept from just compliance and meeting the regulations and such, it would be a tool, a guide to help the companies and help FDA also assess quality systems at companies. So the FDA wanted to get out of this a stronger, more mature QMS. So you have sustainable compliance, focus on performance, continuous improvement, the outcomes, and also metrics of things that impact the patient. And there can be deviations, there can be out of trends, even out of specs that do not necessarily cause a product to be rejected. It depends how much product knowledge you have, things like design space, control space, etc. But in general, the more knowledge you have of your systems, your product, your controls over your product, your analytical methods, how you monitor, how you document your production, it is also easier to identify problems before they happen, as they happen, and also if they do happen, to remediate them. So this measurement that is described here really, they believed, would give a firm its ability to deliver high quality products reliably and without disruption. So again, you can be completely compliant and pour the product down the drain. The mature pharmaceutical quality system is the goal here. Now, this rating system would help everyone in the sense of the manufacturing plants themselves, FDA in helping assess reliability and compliance across companies, especially around the world, the consumers, purchasers, and the patients. There would be more reliability, and also providers and distributors could seek out companies that have a higher score, higher rating, and therefore greater reliability. Very important. Now, if that's the case, then there would be an incentive for these companies to develop the more mature quality system, and with the regulatory flexibilities that are described in various of the guidance, and how to also deal with early phase, late phase, etc. And as we talked about it, then the regulators, health authorities, by having this publicly known scoring, it would free up companies that are doing well from more frequent inspections. And there was always a big challenge with that. So many of the other activities that FDA promoted, whether it was PAT, process analytical technology, and even quality by design, is like everything done with quality by design, originally promised that this would help get your product approved faster or easier. And in practice, it turns out it didn't. So people apply quality by design where it's relevant, especially designing your product or your API or formulation and such. And obviously the same thing with the process analytical technology. It's very costly. It is definitely being applied by the companies that have the scale and the capacity and the funding to do it. But it's not done across the board. This is something that is not going to require great cost and great expense, special equipment and experts, but it does require having resources to monitor and a process of continuous monitoring and improvement and self-reflection in the companies. So if we look at the most common warning letters by category, we really can go from the top, from the left to the right, and we see that things such as, hang on just one second. There we go. I just turned off an alarm, but in case it was disturbing my talking here. We see that environmental monitoring failures, very high. Raw material control and testing, septic technique, media fills, and this is really interesting because it's surprising, because issues of environmental monitoring, those have been discussed since the 70s. Raw material control and testing, yes, I think for clinical product, there's a lot of flexibility there, but as you move along towards launch, there's quite clear understanding that you need to have your raw materials tested, or from qualified vendors, where you would then periodically test, but at least so you can guarantee that your raw materials from whichever vendors you use are reliable and consistent. Aseptic technique, again, I think in one of the PDA-FDA meetings that I was in the last couple of years, there was a frustration, you could hear frustration from FDA that companies internationally were not adopting barrier technology, such as isolators and RABs, and preferably isolators. Yes, they are costly, but at the same time, they have an expectation, and it just seems to be, the fact is that I've worked with companies where it was all open, classical open class 4 gowning, fill finish activities with people walking around and doing things and interventions at Amgen, but people were highly trained, and we really just did not have problems. We had no driver to move to isolators until FDA really pushed it forward, and we were preparing for it, and I was involved in testing things. But it takes extraordinarily skilled people, very diligent practices. So again, it's found that if the systems, the facilities, or your containment, those are not done properly, you can't rely on always having the most qualified people. And as we go down, we see that, things, complaints, sterilization, validation is obviously not a problem, because people really do know how to do it now. And then if we look also to where people are spending their time, and especially let's look at quality assurance and quality improvement. This was based on a survey, again, across industry, that Quality performed. And it seems that people only have 13% of their time to really spend on things like quality improvement, and even quality assurance itself. It's in the middle, and there's a lot of work on administrative tasks, a lot of work on QC, and QC is required. But again, the less problems you have, or the better methods you have, systems you have, you can streamline that. So the point is, if you have processes you're having problems and you do not have the resources applied to improve them, they will not improve. In fact, most likely they will degrade over time. So here, just to summarize, CGMP is really the baseline. What is expected? You must follow GMPs. And there are different ways of following GMPs, but you must follow GMPs. ICHQ-10, again, we're talking about quality systems, very good definition and of responsibilities, which is very important. And if you look at the quality maturity model, it's not instead of ICHQ-10, it's, in a sense, how do we build the monitoring and the metrics to ensure that we continuously improve and at least sustain the appropriate level of quality. So just as a quote we have here of quality management maturity, it's a state attained where drug manufacturers have consistent, reliable, and robust business processes, so they can achieve the quality objectives and promote continual improvement. FDA's vision and mission around this, literally an umbrella under quality management maturity, has all the things that people really need to do based on ICHQ-10. And again, ICHQ-10 simply defined what are the best practices that should have been in place, and adding just a big emphasis on quality metrics. But this really covers everything from employee ownership, culture of quality, communication, productivity, etc., improving quality systems. So all of these things together and metrics based on them can describe the maturity level of the quality system at the manufacturer. And I just wanted to ask, are there any questions that people would want to ask right now, or do we have anything pending?
Amnon, it looks like we have one question in regards to this specific slide that you're going to be starting right now, and that's
Oh, this one. Okay.
yes. So if you want to finish this slide, then I can answer. I can take
Okay.
that question first.
So if we talk about the vision and mission of FDA CEDAR, the Center for Drugs Evaluation and Regulation, and their Office of Quality Surveillance, is that to continuously monitor and provide the state of quality description for all regulated sites and products. That's the vision. The vision is that this initiative will allow the health authorities, regulatory agencies to assess quality maturity at the various sites and trust that. It's a voluntary program, they're not forcing it on people. And the mission outside is that to make sure that based on the fact that they can see which sites have mature quality systems in place, that will also be able to put their efforts on other sites that are more problematic. But that is by implementing signal detection. And signal meaning you're starting to veer, you're starting to have more lost lots, or lost lots where you didn't have them before. Your rate of major critical deviation is going up. You're having out of trends and out of specs. So these various metrics, but at the same time, there were the quality system metrics related to employee engagement, training levels, culture of quality that are beyond just what is happening on the plant floor or in the warehouse or with your facilities. It's those other items that were not really well measured. Even if they were monitored, they're not really well measured. So it's really looking at the basic QMS, GMP, and then the company aspect, personnel aspect, leadership aspect. And for the question?
Yes. So I'm going to share that right here. And it says, if it's voluntary, what are the incentives for signing up?
Okay. The incentive for signing up, and again, this is coming from FDA, it's something that they've been very leery to promise in the past. They alluded to, but they didn't promise, and they really didn't do it. They mentioned PAT and QBD, that their goal actually is to have the system in these companies, and that they annually, release those metrics, to FDA at least, and maybe it's FDA and AMA sharing, and MHRA, their quality metrics, and that based on that, they will be able to focus their resources on the companies that do not have a high level of maturity. So the benefit that should be coming out of this is again risk-based and less frequent inspections in companies that are maintaining a high level of quality maturity. That is something that will still have to be tested in the real world, but that is when they describe it, it's really that they have metrics that they can know which sites, and if we're talking about the focus right now mainly on aseptic drugs, parenterals, again, injectables, and other things like that, know to focus on those companies that need to be inspected, and let the companies that have a mature quality system continue doing what they're doing, because mature quality system includes the monitoring, checking for deviations in systems, in processes and trends, and continuous improvement. And I do have to say, I've been in companies where there was a strong element of a continuous improvement, and we really didn't have a lot of failures, honestly. Some companies that may have literally came out of warning letters, and then 2 years later, they're already, co-training people with like Eli Lilly. They had a warning letter, severe warning letter, and a septic manufacturing plant, a significant issue. None of this is secret. And they came to the FDA and said, here we have a plan. We're going to fix it. And if they told them, you're the only big pharma that ever came to us and said, we agree with your observations and we're going to fix it, so go ahead and we'll check you out in a few years. Whereas some of the other companies, like Pfizer and Merck, etc., or Sanofi or Genzyme, had consent decrees with third parties and great cost and aggravation, having to review every single document, every single approval, every single deviation, every single everything. So it just shows when the company steps up and says, we are taking responsibility for quality, we're going to improve things. It's dramatic, and it was dramatic at Lilly. I mean, I joined them after this event. If anything, they had over control of quality, and we had to start moving back from some of the things, especially related to clinical product development. And that's how Technical Report 56 came about. But in general, from a company that was on consent decree, warning letter, almost consent decree, to literally partnering with FDA on quality best practices, I think that's the incentive, that FDA trusts Lilly, that they will make decisions, and if they find problems, they'll fix them. And if there's things that are issues, they'll work with the FDA to resolve them, versus companies that aren't improving things, trying to do the bare minimum and trying to hide stuff from anybody, including regulators. So I think that's the incentive: much better collaboration and less frequent inspections. And again, the question though, if this isn't shared broadly and publicly, then you could say that the purchasers, and if we're talking about outcomes-based medical treatment, there's a big element of buying products from people that are reliable and quality products. Because if you don't, then you can't actually get the outcomes that all the money that's being spent, whether on medicines and therapies, is not happening. You're spending a lot of money and people aren't getting necessarily better because the products aren't good. So it's supposed to be societal, industry, FDA. And I hope I answered it, because again, this is, it's still sort of late pilot stages, but that's the hope.
You definitely answered it. It definitely sounds there's a lot of good positivity in regards to why you should, even though it's voluntary, it seems like it's very beneficial for everyone that's involved. So I believe that question was answered quite thoroughly. So
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to go to the next slide.
Okay, so we're talking about signals and ingredients here. So we have the old way of doing things, the new way. The old way is just making compliance, GMPs, but without thinking, how do I make the whole company engaged, participant, and supportive of quality? So here are some of the QMM assessment areas that have been proposed. So we have, does the company have a solid quality policy and strategy? How about for manufacturing? It's also a matter of, are they resourced properly in manufacturing? If you under-resource manufacturing, or do not have people with the right experience or the right equipment, the right maintenance, you're going to have problems. You're going to have batch failures. You're going to have all kinds of issues, recalls, etc. Then we look on the left, we have quality culture. And quality culture is a sort of an initiative that needs to be top down from senior leadership and very participatory. That people basically take responsibility for the quality of their work, but also support their peers, both guiding their peers and also alarming them if they see things that people are doing that could impact product quality or data quality, etc. People management, having enough of the right people qualified, trained, is important. If the people are not with the right experience or capabilities or training, that creates lots of problems. And I know people talk about human error. I think human error per se is really rare as the true causal factor, but there are other things that are done that cause people to not be able to do their job properly or to make mistakes. And that can be bad procedures, poorly written procedures. There's an example of a company in Netherlands, I believe, that they had the instructions on the table where people were working, let's say putting together the kits or something like that. And the procedure was like, on some stand 6 feet away, and people couldn't read it clearly. And it was mistakes were written down to human error. No, they should get some kind of stand that attaches to the table or comes down from the ceiling that's not 6 to 10 feet away, that people can actually read the instructions. That to me, human error is the outcome of that, or equipment that's not ergonomic, difficult to operate. not error proofing things, not color coding things, being able to connect, a hose backwards into an HPLC and flushing your product out instead of purifying it has happened, and that can be fixed by, putting in specific type of valves and connectors that you can't do that. Then we have, of course, analytics and metrics, which is QC, but also quality metrics, deviations, kappa, how quickly do you close them? Are they effective when they're closed? Out of trend, out of specs, lost lots. And then we have risk management and all of these, obviously quality system and processes, good systems that work, logical systems, all of those together can help really bring forward, a culture of quality, culture of excellence here as ISP is proposing in one of their guidelines. Now, the maturity curve just really shows that if we're talking about, the baseline quality control, we have quality control, we're testing things, but we don't really have good metrics for how well we're doing in quality itself overall, just testing specific things. And product review program is, again, we passed, deviations, what we did, very reactive. As it evolves, we're adding quality assurance, which is also how do we manage things, quality. So we have different more metrics, promoting quality culture, we have commitment from leadership. Some companies have done Six Sigma programs, Kaizen programs, other things. But the culture of quality is really a sort of ongoing thing that needs to be promoted and measured based on feedback, surveys from people, and the objective metrics too. And then when you have a strong, maturity in your quality system, so you have quality control, you have quality assurance, and also improvement. So what metrics are we measuring? Do we have the metrics for when people are overworked? Do we have metrics when people are not really fully capable of doing a certain procedure? Or how effective our training is, how effective our preventive actions are? So ideally, predictive analytics, you can get into it. You can also get predictive analytics for things like motors, refrigeration units, etc., that now will actually monitor and tell you, you need to change the motor, you need to change the coil, you need to do maintenance, so that we're not waiting for failure and lose product or have some gross, very difficult deviation to get out of a strong quality culture, and of course commitment across the board from top to down. So we find that the higher quality maturity is, then actually we're spending less money on lost lots, less money on rework, less money on recalls, and the reputation increases too. Obviously, any type of shorting the market or recalls is a big hit to the reputation of the company, and also incentivize other companies to pick up the slack there. So we're talking about, how to be mature, the old way of doing things, not very proactive, a lot of negative administration instead, in a sense of documentation of everything, because we really can't trust everything's working okay. Our metrics only tell us when bad things had happened, not when they are likely to happen in the future. A lot of firefighting culture, not cohesive. There could be, people, let's say production and quality and other groups together, not always collaborating, not working in a joint manner, towards a better outcome. Low morale leads to high turnover. I don't know anybody who likes working in a highly stressed facility full of deviations and issues. It's definitely challenging. And the compliance is really focused on compliance. And again, the decisions are made by a small group, not necessarily by the people who know most and best about the product and the process. So we talk about high maturity. So we actually, we use electronic systems to save time. We can do training, reading SOPs, other seminars, etc., like that, delivered to people. People not running around looking for documents to sign, because they're all going through an electronic system that's highly preferred, even for smaller companies and startups. There are systems that are affordable and can be implemented in an affordable manner. Not everybody has to get the most expensive, complex system either. And then being predictive about things, which, as I said, you start seeing your deviation rate trending up in a certain area. You don't wait for the major failure, for the critical deviation, to start looking in how to prevent problems. Trust and openness, obviously company culture is very critical here. We know any company that there is no trust, or it's a punitive environment, usually does not lead to staff retention or good quality in anything. And obviously staff engaged, empowered to make decisions at their appropriate level. That is also very helpful. So most companies are somewhere in between. And I have to say that if we're talking about, and again, this survey they were doing was not really geared at startups. It was geared more at established, large volume manufacturers, and even in that area, that family of companies around the world, is somewhere in between. People do compliance, they react to things when they go bad, but they are not necessarily really putting a lot of effort on preventing bad things from happening and improving, making more good things happening. So,
And we actually do have a question real quick in regards to
sure,
that
please.
last slide.
Sure.
So the question is, are there any unintended consequences, roadblocks, or other concerns you anticipate with a voluntary QMM program? And what barriers to participate do you anticipate?
Um, well, originally during the pilot, obviously it was only certain companies were approached, and I don't know how many of them out of the number approached agreed to participate in this. Um, the truth is, it could have self-selected for the better companies, but I'd say that it was somewhere in between. Roadblocks, barriers. I think that first thing, this to me, this dovetails with ICHQ 10 and general continuous improvement in quality cultural philosophy. So for people who are doing that, and people who want to do that, this is just adopting this is another way of both being able to show to yourself internally and externally if if the improvements you wanted to implement are actually happening. So I think that's the net positive, even if it never leads to anything better from it, anything specific in FDA behavioral response. Just saying again, in the future, um, having those type of metrics is a good thing, and some companies already have these type of metrics too. I think this helps incentivize leadership to add to it the organizational quality culture, employee satisfaction, stress level, etc. It's also very important elements. Very important elements. Do they feel empowered? Is communication well? Are decisions made by the right people? Those are things that typically you wouldn't have in like a quality management review or a annual product review. I know that in companies I've worked in, smaller companies, I try to put some of those things even in our quarterly quality management reviews. But I think this gives elements that, based on experience and in practice, that if they're implemented, it will improve the overall reliability and profitability of the companies. I think that's the incentives. As far as barriers, I don't really see much barriers. Obviously, it has to be sustained. But even if it wasn't sustained, in principle, these are good, very good things to do for companies who aren't already doing them. They will lead to improvements in quality and reduce losses and improve employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction. So it's almost, you'd say these things are no-brainers. It's just, since they're not in the list of compliance, they're not must-haves, but they really should be must-haves, just for different reasons.
Great. Thank you for answering that question.
Sure thing. And for metrics maturity, see, here we go, repeat deviation rate. So people have deviations. Hopefully not a lot of major and very rare or no critical deviations. But if you start seeing deviations in a certain area repeating, there's a certain spot in the plant keeps showing up high for micro, or a certain operator with gowning issues, or certain, it really depends, but repeat, or type of gowning that tends to have higher failure. If that is not really fixed, it's not seen as a leading metric to potential greater failure, that's a mistake, because eventually that gowning could lead to contaminated batch and the loss of a batch. It could lead to, if you have a leak or a gasket, and you just keep replacing the gasket, but you don't look and see, is this gasket even appropriate for this type of fitting? And I know an example from years ago at Amgen is that we're having some issues with leaks in the tri-clamp sanitary fitting, and they kept changing the gaskets. And there are two things that were found. One was found that people were over tightening the gaskets and squeezing them out. And it turns out that PVDF, if you squeeze the gasket tight enough, it could actually create a leak. It doesn't, there's a certain point where it doesn't get tighter. It actually starts deforming. So there are two options. We could have, gotten people go around with torque wrenches, so they tighten things only a certain way, and that was felt to be burdensome. And we evaluated Teflon-coated stainless steel O-rings that you could tighten as much as you want, but they wouldn't deform, and that solved the problem. And this all happened at one plant, and then we adopted it across the company. So that's where you have this repeat deviations really need to be, even if they're minor, need to be thought out is how can this prevent something bad or worse from happening. Change control is not always assessed properly. The risk level is not always assessed properly, the impact, and then the effectiveness after the change. Those are things that have to be done, but at the same time, the people that both assess and approve the change have to be the right people. That's the part where it's not just GMPs, it's part of the how do you manage your staff and having the right staff make the decisions based on experience and areas of responsibility. It's terrible if people who don't really know your system or some external person comes in and tells you what needs to be fixed. It may or may not be. It may fix it. Maybe it fixes it temporarily. Maybe it'll make things worse. Kappa effectiveness is a big one. A lot of companies do not truly check for Kappa effectiveness. They kind of pretend to do it. So again, they do a Kappa effectiveness check, but if it's not meaningful, it's a waste of time in a sense. Has to be done, but it's still a waste of people's effort and very frustrating if you're doing meaningless work. And then again, equipment, that's a bigger question. There are ways of checking, as I said, with monitoring. There are companies even will sell you equipment that you can just attach to your, certain systems and equipments that will sense how they're doing, electrical load on your compressors for your HVAC. And, so that 3 years, time to change out the compressor. As opposed to it breaks, and then you find out that the coil that you had custom made 15 years ago doesn't exist anymore, and you bring in, freezer trucks to put your product in. And I've seen that happen. Won't mention the name of the company, but I've seen that happen. So that's also another aspect when you're designing plants. You have to make the right people also make decisions, so they don't do things like get weird custom equipment that nobody else uses, or that if it breaks, you don't have spare parts. So but that's, again, the experienced people will know not to make those decisions. Then, of course, for processes and especially with parenterals, you do have large-scale processes, a lot of samples. For biotech manufacturing, you make 10, 20 batches a year. You can't even do SPC with that. And what would that mean for a process that has 100 different sub-processes in it? Whereas if you're making vials, syringes, tablets, etc., it's much easier to actually use true industrial metrics that will, in real time, you'll be able, whether it's check weighing or filling or etc., quality sampling, you'll be able to get real statistical data. Are you maintaining a process where you want to be? Are you drifting up, down, edge of failure? Definitely recommend using some sort of industrial statistics, SPC and these type of capabilities for large volume processes where you have, shipping, for example. Actually, you can do that type of statistics too, even though it's not usually a directed continuous metric like microliters or grams, but definitely there's pass, fail. There are different categories with shipping lost that can be used for industrial statistics if you're sending hundreds or thousands or even more, millions of packages around the world. Right first time, but right first time is a misnomer, because it should be right first time after developing a system or equipment that is reliable and robust and tested and validated with the right people operating it. You don't just throw something together and tell people right first time, never make a mistake. So the concept of right first time has to be meaningful, and that means that you have a system that should work, even and maybe it failed in the past, A lot of systems fail out of the box or upon installation. The right first time should be once you make sure the system is reliable and robust in all its materials, all its concepts, and how it's run, and properly trained people. Lot release cycle time, definitely. It can be streamlined. If certain things are electronic, that can be streamlined, but you also need the right people to do it and enough of the right people to do it. Insufficient staffing is a chronic problem, and especially in contract manufacturers or generics, because the incentive is to cut costs. But cutting costs and staff ultimately will almost always lead to failures. And lead time, yes, I mean, that's planning things properly, budgeting things properly, and then seeing if you hit your targets. Right first time rate, again, but that's based on having a robust system. Timeless of calibration, very, very important, because a system that is out of calibration is not giving you accurate data or accurate work, can cause lots of problems. Here's some of the other metrics that we were talking about. Industrial metrics that are relevant, that can be used also, but these are the thing is, if you have poor quality, it's going to be very difficult to meet these. You will be potentially shorting or near shorting your batches. A disposition may take you longer. You may not be able to optimize your fill rate, but again, there could be a ceiling to that. But then if you need more capacity, then it'll be understood that you need more capacity, not speed up the process to its edge of failure. And here's from the survey. Oops, sorry. Here's from the survey some of the questions that people answered, and how would you rate the maturity and overall effectiveness of your quality management system? And paper, it's about 50%. Spreadsheets is better. Using an EQMS, it's even better. Not perfect. That sometimes some EQMSs are maybe easier to work with. Some EQMSs are actually not really very good, or I've seen EQMSs, well-known global EQMSs that have been around for a long time, that actually make it harder for you to do things. And that is not really the goal of the EQMS. It should be straightforward, easy to understand, processes, actually track what the process should be. And for that, you also need to have a good paper process. And just to share a motto of mine from the early days of computer validation that I was involved in, is based on my observations, because at that time I was in validation and working with all kinds of systems and such. And my observation was that a bad manual system will turn into an even worse automated system. So if you have a bad manual system, just automating it, yeah, maybe you won't lose paperwork, but it's going to be still a terrible process. So before you automate a manual system of these type of administrative transactional activities, it should be mapped, it should be optimized, and make sure that it's the right process. When you have the right process, then automate it. Now, if your EQMS comes already with systems built in and they're good enough for what you need, that's fine too. But some companies do need to tweak, especially larger companies. They have sometimes different levels of approval. But in general, if you can adopt what is generic or vanilla processes, that's actually great, because everybody coming into your company will generally understand how to use them. If you have to add a special thing, and I'm not talking about how you call things, that's not really changing the process. If you call something a deviation versus a nonconformance versus an event, it's how it's processed. Logical, straightforward, right people approving things in the right place. So what we don't know, are they going to be public facing to help decision making? How is that working? How do we actually, what do the ratings compare? And then what about the companies that are not going to have quality maturity metrics presented? And will they be used to actually do what is the goal, to establish best practices and identify improvement opportunities? And also understanding that we can't expect the exact same metrics in all companies, and there are differences in companies and processes, how things are also run in different countries, from a organizational personnel perspective. Europe can be very different from the US and in Asia, and etc. So the pilots were done, their consultations with industry, and FDA is always looking for feedback from people, and for, again, hopefully it's not all the same companies that are anyways proactive doing this. The goal is to bring in additional companies on this, and I think some of them are just waiting to see, uh, does this save me money or does this make me money? But I will tell you that for all the knowledge of quality practices and histories going all the way from Deming onward, and whether it's Six Sigma or Kaizen or the just-in-time quality methods, it's known that when they're done properly and honestly, meaning to improve processes, not that just get someone promoted, they work. They reduce loss, they improve reliability. That in itself is going to make your company more money, more profit. So I think some of the things are very intrinsic, and we don't know exactly when this will be mature and brought out. And just some thoughts at the end. The ICH guidelines are excellent, and obviously Q9, Q10 are directly relevant to this discussion, because the quality maturity model is builds on assumption that you're implementing ICH Q9 and Q10 properly. And now that Q10 has added additional information on management responsibilities, that it's no longer you have to guess at that. I think that's important, and that's what I always stress in companies that I join. I quote right out of Q10. And continuous improvement, it does not have to be expensive. I launched a Stealth Sigma program at Amgen, and it was myself, another person and a half, and we were able, within a year, we were able to save over $1 million to the company just by fixing product loss in one of the plants. They made vials and a few other activities and improvements, and then they decided to launch a global Six Sigma program. Now, I don't know how much they're maintaining or sustaining it. Some of these efforts also kind of lose steam, but that's also because eventually people miss the vision that it really is about improving processes, not promotions or accolades or bonuses and things like that. But if it's maintained properly as the culture of quality should include continuous improvement. And in fact, the goal is that you don't need a Six Sigma program. You're just improving things all the time. You're doing things, you're executing things, you're fixing things, and you're improving things. I think that's the key, whether it's closing big gaps or, and here's another thing, even a compliant process today, if you don't keep improving it, updating it, eventually you will fall out of compliance over time as industry changes and expectations change. So that's why this proactive, continuous self-monitoring approach is good. And of course, digitization by using electronic quality systems or document control systems or other, like we talked about, equipment, facility, reliability monitoring systems will help. Okay, so that's really it. Are there any additional questions at the end?
Yes, Amnon, we did have a question. They say, let me just share that. Said, maybe I missed it, but is the FDA assessment forms or questionnaires, are they public, or is the program only going to be conducted by the FDA representatives? And when is it going to be available?
Okay, those are the big questions. The program was a pilot. Yeah, the program was a pilot. A bunch of companies around the world were surveyed. I know in some places the foreign companies didn't want to, but some did. So again, in some ways, the companies that don't feel they can actually think about it, your company, and you say, I don't think that we can actually show that we have a robust and self-sustaining quality culture in our company. That's not a really good thing, but it has been done. I've been going the last 3 years to talks about it. 2 years ago, there were kind of updates. Last year was more of we're closing it out. This year, I think a bit more of the same. People are waiting to see how it really implements itself. But as I said, the focus right now was on large volume, or high volume production of parenterals, sterile products of various means, because you also have sterile ophthalmics and other stuff, and you also have sterile implants and such. But if we're talking about typical vial syringes, blow fill seal, things like that, we are waiting to hear, how the FDA wants to operationalize this more broadly. So again, it's as I said, even if you don't call it QMM, you just really need to follow Q9, Q10, put in some quality, Kaizen, whatever you want to call it, continuous improvement and culture of quality, and have the right people, enough of the right people doing the right work with the right instructions and the right equipment and the right materials should just be beneficial. And it shouldn't just be based on because I'm on program. A company should intrinsically understand the benefits. Even small or large companies, even small improvements can have dramatic impacts. Cell therapy, gene therapy, it doesn't have to be massive places with 500 people, 1,000 people working there. And of course, companies that are larger with hundreds of people in the plant and people doing a lot of, in a sense, not work that repeats itself because of the type of production that's there. And all of those aspects, especially the cultural aspects, the leadership aspects, the communication and empowering of people, are among the most important things you have, besides, of course, having enough of the right people and the right equipment and such. I mean, you want to shortchange that, you'll have problems no matter what you do. But let's say that baseline, you're trying to do the right thing. This will help your company succeed even further, and then we'll be more competitive because you'll have less batches and better reliability and better reputation. It just the improvement part. It's like this continuous improvement loop. Things just get better, and then your company is happier and you have better retainment. And I'm looking at other companies like Lilly and a few other companies that just really had this great attitude towards quality that they adopted, and it's still paying off big time. And companies like Eli Lilly, you hardly ever hear of quality like GMP manufacturing production quality issues. Not that they can't exist, but there'll be fluctuations and things drift over time. But in general, some of these companies have very good reputations now, and other companies are still having consent decrees and plants being shut down. So tremendous cost. So think, you want to be, or Amgen, you want to be in the company where things in generally are going well and getting better versus a company where you're just stagnating or things are going worse because trying to save money.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amnon. It looks like that was the last question. So thank you for this extremely comprehensive presentation that you did today, even
thank you.
Without your video. So thank you so much for your time. And everyone, today's session will be recorded. You will receive a follow-up email in the next couple of days with this recording and the presentation. And if you do not, please feel free to reach out to us here at Qualio. As a reminder, this is a 3-day event. Today is day 1. Additionally, you will receive a certificate for attending this webinar in the next 24 hours. So please feel free to share that on LinkedIn, tag Qualio, our co-sponsor Qualistry, and just share that great news. And then lastly, we would love feedback. This, like I said before, we are in day 1 out of 3 days of this virtual event. And please feel free to fill out this survey that pops up on your screen before you exit the session. But other than that, thank you so much for your time today, Amnon. And
thank you. And yes. I also just want to thank Qualistry and Qualio for organizing these type of important events. And I think that they're helpful in trying to bring people to actually not just give promotional talks, but talks about the actual topics that are of interest to people.
Interest and importance. So yes, thank you so much for your time. And everyone, please feel free to join us tomorrow. We will have day 2 of 3 more fantastic presentations along with on Thursday. So thank you all for your time and have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you are.